To begin this playlist, you need one clear truth. Enterprise architecture is no longer a nice to have function that produces diagrams when someone asks. You are operating in a market where organizations must modernize, reduce cost, meet security and compliance obligations, and deliver change faster without breaking critical services. In this environment, you are not measured by how well you describe technology. You are measured by how well you shape decisions, guide investment, reduce risk, and enable delivery at scale. With that urgency in mind, you can now define the job in a way that makes immediate sense to leaders. As an enterprise architect, you sit at the intersection of business strategy and technology execution. You translate business intent into architecture direction. You also translate technology reality back into business language, so leaders can make informed choices and avoid expensive mistakes. You do not own every technical decision, but you do shape how decisions are made, how trade-offs are evaluated, and how architecture stays coherent across programs and portfolios. Now that the role is clear, you can focus on the two outcomes you are always expected to deliver. First, you provide direction, meaning you define where the organization is heading and why that direction makes sense. Second, you provide confidence, meaning leaders and delivery teams can trust the chosen path is feasible, secure, supportable, and aligned to standards. When enterprise architecture is done well, it reduces uncertainty, prevents rework, and stops technology drift. When it is done poorly, it becomes theater. With outcomes established, you can now step into your first major responsibility: translating strategy into investment direction. Leaders rarely bring a clean technology problem. They bring goals like improving customer experience, reducing operational cost, expanding to new markets, or meeting regulatory requirements. Your role is to convert those goals into clear technology direction. What must change? What must be protected? And what trade-offs are acceptable? For example, if speed to deliver is the goal, you shape investment towards standard platforms and reusable patterns while keeping security, privacy, and resilience non-negotiable. With strategy translation in place, you can now build the storyline that makes enterprise architecture useful. Current state architecture captures the reality of systems, constraints, dependencies, and pain points without turning into endless documentation. Target state architecture describes the intended future in a way that can be governed and funded, not as a wish list. Transition architecture bridges the gap by explaining sequencing, dependencies, and safe stepping stones. This storyline is how you connect vision to delivery. Once the storyline exists, leaders want to see the plan. That is where the roadmap becomes your most visible deliverable. A roadmap is not a list of upgrades. It is an investment narrative that links initiatives to capability, uplift, value, risk reduction, and timing. A credible roadmap shows dependencies and decision points, and it also shows what will not be done yet and why. For example, you might recommend uplifting identity and access foundations before large-scale migration, because without strong identity controls, you are simply moving risk faster. With roadmaps defined, you can now use capability models to align conversations and reduce confusion. Capabilities describe what the organization must be able to do, independent of which systems currently exist. Capability mapping helps you stop debating tools and start aligning on outcomes. It also exposes duplication, gaps, and inconsistent approaches. When you show capability heat, leaders can see where investment is urgent, and delivery teams can see why priorities exist. With capabilities and roadmaps aligned, you now need guardrails so delivery stays consistent across teams. Principles are decision rules that guide choices. For example, designing for reuse, designing for resilience, and designing for security by default. Standards define agreed ways to implement common needs. For example, identity patterns, logging requirements, integration approaches, and data protection expectations. The goal is not bureaucracy. The goal is faster delivery with less rework, because teams stop reinventing the same solutions. Once guardrails exist, governance is how you ensure decisions actually follow them. You often lead or influence forums such as architecture review boards and design authorities. These forums are not meant to block delivery. They exist to make decisions visible, test assumptions, record trade-offs, and clarify accountability. When governance is run well, delivery accelerates because teams gain clarity early and avoid late-stage surprises. With governance established, assurance is how you stay engaged throughout delivery without becoming a bottleneck. Architectural assurance means you guide and validate decisions from initiation through design, build, implementation, and ongoing operations. You check that the solution remains aligned to target state and that deviations are justified and documented. You also prevent a common failure mode. Designs that look good on paper but become fragile in production because operational needs were ignored. With assurance in place, you now step into the responsibility that is increasingly expected of enterprise architecture: secure outcomes. You ensure architecture outcomes align with frameworks and control expectations relevant to your environment. For example, Protective Security Policy Framework, Information Security Manual, and Essential 8. You embed secure by design thinking, so security is designed into identity, trust boundaries, data protection, monitoring, and resilience. You also identify architecture and security risks, define mitigations, and make sure residual risk has a clear acceptance pathway with accountable owners. With responsibilities covered, you now make the role real by focusing on deliverables that drive action. You are expected to produce or contribute to architecture blueprints, high-level designs, solution architecture designs, interface control documents, and security design artifacts. The value is not the document. The value is that decisions, constraints, and responsibilities are captured clearly, so teams do not interpret the solution differently. A strong design artifact helps delivery move faster because ambiguity disappears. With deliverables clear, you now focus on the skill that determines your impact. Influence. You partner with executives, delivery leadership, engineers, and vendor partners, and you adapt your communication to each audience. Executives need options, trade-offs, cost impact, risk impact, and a clear recommendation. Engineering teams need patterns, constraints, and the rationale behind guardrails so implementation stays consistent. Your credibility grows when you remain pragmatic, calm under pressure, and decision-oriented. With stakeholder engagement established, you now understand how trust is earned through disciplined trade-off decisions. You constantly balance speed versus control, innovation versus standardization, cost versus resilience, and local optimization versus enterprise consistency. You build trust when you explain why a decision is recommended, what risks it introduces, how those risks are mitigated, and what would cause the decision to be revisited later. This is where you move from diagram producer to strategic advisor. With trade-offs understood, you now position enterprise architecture correctly inside delivery. You support delivery teams with guidance and decision support, not with endless approvals. You ensure patterns are reusable, scalable, resilient, and supportable, so solutions survive real production conditions. You collaborate with product owners, scrum masters, engineers, and subject matter experts to remove uncertainty early. When you do this well, teams feel enabled rather than controlled. With the complete picture set, you can now bring it to life with a realistic scenario. Imagine your organization wants to modernize a customer platform to improve digital experience and reduce operating cost. You clarify success measures, capture current state pain points, define a target state with consistent identity and data governance, and propose transition steps that sequence foundational work first. You then translate it into a roadmap tied to capabilities, run governance to keep patterns consistent, and provide assurance so operational needs are not forgotten. This is what enterprise architecture looks like when it delivers real outcomes. As you finish the lecture, you should also recognize common failure patterns so you avoid them early. One failure pattern is over documentation, where current state becomes endless and delivery stalls. Another is over ambition, where target state is too perfect to fund or sequence. Another is governance theater, where reviews happen but decisions are not recorded or enforced. You avoid these by keeping artifacts decision focused, keeping roadmaps pragmatic, and embedding security and risk thinking from the start. Let's now discuss the key takeaways from what you learned so far, so you can carry the most important ideas into the rest of this playlist. You are not judged by the number of diagrams you produce. You are judged by the clarity and confidence you bring to decisions. You connect business strategy to delivery reality by maintaining a credible storyline across current state, target state, and transition, and by converting that storyline into roadmaps and capability-driven investment. You enable consistency and speed through principles, standards, governance, and architectural assurance. You treat security, compliance, and risk as non-negotiables, and you build influence through pragmatic decision-making and delivery enablement. As you move into the next lecture, commit to treating enterprise architecture as a leadership discipline, not a documentation activity. Subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the next videos in this playlist. Like this video because it helps YouTube share it with more learners who need this guidance. Comment with the role you are targeting and the biggest enterprise architecture challenge you are facing right now. Share this video with a colleague or a team that is trying to deliver change with less risk and more clarity.